Hello dear chess friends of International Chess School. With this video, I'll begin a series of lectures devoted to the art of defense in chess. Why I do this? Because defense in chess, in my opinion, is a little bit an underrated subject in the chess literature. And I think that being able to defend correctly, it is as important as being able to attack correctly. And also, like, we have defined the elements of the attack, we have to define the critical elements of defense. I would like to stress that good defenders has to have a good command of tactics, since the attack can be carried on based on general principles. But the defense must be tactically specific. When you're on defense, you have to calculate pretty well. And in the first place, you have to know where to wait the blow from the opponent's part. And you have to calculate exactly how to repel the enemy threats. A beginner will realize that he's defending only when the enemy army surrounds his king, while as the players feel for the danger increases, the stronger player and the more objective player at the same time will know soon enough when he has an inferior position. And this skill to realize when you have to defend when you have an inferior position is needed in order to avoid inappropriate actions and to start organizing an adequate defense. Another important idea about defense to be remembered is that defense is not only needed for bad positions. The player might have the advantage, but because of an immediate threat or the opponent's temporary initiative, he must defend. The first example is from a game between two ex-world champions, Emanuel Lasker with the black pieces and Max Euwe, which later became also a world champion with the white pieces. And in this case, it was used the passive defense, or the so-called direct defense. We will try to differentiate later, but first of all, I like to enunciate few elements of the passive defense, of the direct defense. First of all, the first important element is protection. You have to defend against immediate temporary threats with durable moves. What do I mean by durable moves? Moves which keeps your pieces on defended squares. Another important element is overprotection. Sometimes, due to the local forces superiority in one area of the board or for the opponent, we have to overprotect some weak spots in our camp. In the third place, another element, another method to defend directly, to defend passively, is transforming the castle position, the castle king, by pushing the pawns in front of the king. Why to do this? In order to stop the attack. A peculiar case could result in a blockaded position. But be careful, because pawn moves are highly committal. We will see one in this example, and you should never unnecessarily weaken the position where the opponent is attacking. Another important element to be used when you are defending directly, when you are defending passively, you're just replying to his threats or exchanges. This means you have to exchange the most threatening attackers. Lasker started here with Rook b8 in this position. e5 could be considered as an active defense, an indirect one, which doesn't consider the characteristic of the position. This move leaves behind a whole complex of weak light squares, d5, f5, and increases the potential of this bishop, which is extremely annoying. And immediately after e5, the opponent will jump with knight e5, bishop takes, knight takes f5. Not only that, the light square's bishop remains without the opponent, but after queen f8, queen c7, white's queen penetrates in black's camp and stresses the vulnerability of the b7 pawn. So in the game, black played rook b8. The rook from a8 was played to b8. A mysterious rook move at first sight, meant to prepare bishop c8, d7, without concerning about the previous queen move, the previous shown queen c7. In fact, black is starting using his passive rook, overprotecting the b7 pawn. And another important element of the defense is activating your passive pieces. Exactly like you can't carry on an attack without all your forces. It is the same case about defense. You have to play with all your pieces. So with rook b8, we see a good example of overprotection, but at the same time, the rook from b8 is on a defended square. White continued with e4. He's threatening e5. Black played rook d8. He resisted one more time to the temptation of defending actively by playing e6, e5. In this case, the negative consequences, as stressed before, are higher than the positive ones. So you should always try to recon this way if the negative consequences are bigger than the positive ones. Since, again, after e6, e5, white will gain control over the important a2, g8 diagonal, f5 and d5 will become vulnerable. And if white will push himself e4, e5 here, gaining space, one of the black knights, the knight from f6, has to find a secure home. But e5, not only that it gains space and deflects the knight from f6, which has a good defensive position here. You should always keep such a minor piece around your king. It is an excellent defender. Actually, the knight from f6 is the best defender of black's castle. But pushing e5, white will take under control also the d6 square, which is pretty unpleasant. So black figured out a way to defend the d6 square, and this involves knight f6, e8. So after e4, e5, one of the black knights will go to e8, while on the other hand, the knight from b6 could be activated on d5. So if white pushes e4, e5, it will have negative consequences as well. So black played rook d8, rook ft1, bishop d7. Eventually black finished the activization of all his forces. e5, knight e8. This was already foreseen by black. He's defending the d6 square, and white played bishop b1. And the question that arises here is how to defend, using active or passive defense. The passive of the direct defense involves simply holding the lines in the first place, responding to threats, trying to prevent certain moves, or, as I already mentioned, to exchange the most dangerous attackers. The active defense, on the other hand, or the indirect defense, is related to the idea of counterplay or a counterattack. It involves activating the forces with the help of the forcing moves. And the aim of the active defense is to keep the attacker so busy that he fails to pursue his attack to its conclusion. In this case, we have to deal with the passive defense. We have only one weakness in this case, because our forces are pretty well mobilized. We have a similar display of the pieces, and only the king could be considered a little bit vulnerable in this case. The guiding line, the guiding principle of the passive defense is economy, which states that the defender should take minimum risk, avoid superfluous moves, make as few concessions as possible, and not use more pieces than necessary for defense. You have to listen well to this principle of economy, and all the time when you are trying to use this passive defense, this kind of defense works when you have only one weakness. If you have more than one weakness, then you should go for the active defense. Of course, we will analyze the active defense in other examples. g6. This is a necessary concession. It's not just a weakening move. It prevents the attack on the long diagonal and makes white's pieces looks useless on that diagonal. Black has correctly assessed that his centralized and well-coordinated pieces will be able to compensate the weakness of the dark squares. White continued with queen a4. He wants to translate the queen on the king side, but the g6 pawn does a great job. It controls h5, f5, and actually it creates a sort of blockade on light squares. Bishop a4. Now black is investing few bishop's moves to induce weaknesses in the enemy camp. Here is a thin border between the passive defense and the active one. While he used the economy principle till now, suddenly black will start being more aggressive. b3, bishop d7. Now the a3 pawn is hanging, so white has to do something about it. a4 and knight d5. After black provoked the pawn push a3 a4, only now he jumps with the knight on d5. The knight on d5 looks great, but it doesn't have a real function, but now with the possibility of playing knight b4, the knight can find a better square. You'll see why. So the two pawn moves, e4, e5 and a4, a3, a4 have created weak squares in White's camp. And the knight from d5 has a pretty stable position, as it can't be attacked by bishop e2 any longer. Bishop d3. White is trying to bring the bishop on c4, which is the most passive piece in Black's camp. The knight from e8 has an excellent defensive task here. It defends f6 and d6, but the rook from b8 is no longer needed to defend b7, so he can afford to play rook bc8 and to start fighting for the c4. Bishop c4, bishop c6, knight takes c6, and b takes c6. Again, Black continues with this solid approach, this light squares strategy. His position is extremely solid. He used the overprotection principle not only by playing g6, but he placed his pieces on defended squares. White doesn't have real targets at this position. Even if White has a space advantage due to the e5 pawn, it's very difficult to find a plan. The knight from d5 controls a lot of important central squares. The knight from e8 is defending f6 and d6, and Black's to-do list will consist in doubling the rooks on the d file, and then he will retreat the knight from d5, and it will try penetrate in White's camp somewhere on d4 or d2, since White no longer has the dark squares bishop. On the other hand, if White exchanges the bishop for the knight, then after c takes d5, Black will have a free supported pawn, which is extremely useful in endgames. I'd like to mention that bishop c6 earlier here involved exchanging one of the potential attackers, the knight from d4, and soon the advanced pawns like e5 will turn from advantages into weaknesses. Rook d3, probably bishop d5, as I mentioned, was preferable. This is an optimistic move. Usually White should find some weaknesses in Black's camp. It's not indicated to attack a position without weaknesses. It is true that Black's pawn structure on the king side is far from being perfect. White tries to attack the light squares, but this requires too much time, and the position is unstable in the center, and creating another PC setup on the king side involves much time, and Black will be able to react in the center. Knight b4, rook f3, rook c7, the flexible way to double the rooks. Rook cd7 to follow, h4, rook cd7, h5, a nice looking move, but in fact has a negative consequence. The g5 square is available for the queen now. Black played queen g7. Now look at the black species coordination. Only the knight from e8 has defensive tasks, while the other pieces have approached white's camp considerably. Rook e1, rook d4, h takes g6. Now black could have taken on e4, but in this case a solid player would not consider exchanging the character of the pawn structure. You have to maintain the character of the position as long as you understood the position, as long as you understood the peculiarities of the position. So h takes g6. There's no need to enter in tactical tricks. Queen e2. Now White didn't feel the danger. He didn't realize the critical moment of the game when the trend of the game has changed. This was happened when he started this slow attack with h4, h5, rook f3. It involved a lot of tempo losses. Rook d2, queen f1. It is the moment for the knight to jump in the battle. Knight c2, knight e4, queen takes e5, knight takes f6, queen takes f6, rook takes f6, knight takes f6. As a result of this calculated operations, black gave up the queen for rook, knight and a pawn, but he managed to exchange all white's active forces. On the other hand, he remained with the active pieces. Remember that in all kind of exchange operation, the pieces that remains on the board are much more important than the pieces that came off the board. Rook c1, knight e4, bishop e2, knight d4 with a double attack, bishop f3, knight f2. There's no need to rush with knight takes f3 as long as the knight is centralized. Queen c4, knight d3. White has no targets. Black still holds this solid rock position. Rook f1, knight e5, queen b4, knight e takes f3, check, g takes f3, knight e2 check, king h2, knight f4. Of course, if king g3, then white's king will end up in a mate net after g5 and rook g2, king h1, rook d4. Look how black is keeping this rook on the last rank, on the back rank, in order to defend. Anyway, this rook can be activated on h8 by the help of the move king g7, queen e7, king g7, as long as queen e5 is not possible, queen c7, rook 8 d5, preventing the counterplay with queen e5, rook e1, rook g5, queen c6, rook d8, and in front of the mate with the rook h8, White resigned. So this first example with the passive defense, we saw how black resisted to the active approach with e6, e5. He first of all realized that he has only one weakness, a certain vulnerability on the in front of the king. But he realized that it has to overprotect the king, and he wonderfully used the principle of the economy in defense, which, I repeat, states that the defender should take minimum risk. He didn't risk anything. He kept a solid position with defended pieces. He avoided superfluous moves. If you will replay the game, you will see that each piece was moved only once or twice. He didn't make concessions, and he didn't use more pieces than necessary for defense. Till our next lecture,